Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the Consultant Roundtable. We're very excited to have you join us today. On our agenda, we have a topic on web scheduling. We have the Consulting Toolbox. We'll discuss Sage University for You, what's coming up, and then our upcoming sessions. So first out of the box, we have web scheduling. Lisa Dorsey, who is a project manager on the Center of Excellence team, will kick off the web scheduling session and provide some information in terms of what happens when you get a a web scheduling on your program and what are the standard project management protocols. I'll provide some insight in terms of some of the basic X3 setup that's needed that you may want to know in the beginning before you actually begin the web scheduling setup. So we'll kick things off from there. Lisa, do you want to provide a little better introduction than I gave you?
You were fine, Clark. Hi, everyone. Lisa Dorsey, as Clark mentioned, I'm a project manager with Expert Services. And what we wanted to go through a little bit is just to provide some information on implementing web scheduling and the processes and the steps. I think, we're getting a lot of requests coming into our team. And there's a lot of questions. It's how do I get started, or what's the process? So the purpose of this meeting here today is just to go through that process. And it's interactive. So if you want to put in something in chat, or at the end you want to wait, we'll have a Q&A at the very end. That's fine too. But our agenda really is to go through the implementation process, talk about a few of the prerequisites, a timeline and estimate. This is just a broad kind of estimate on what we're seeing, when we implement web scheduling, the documents that we use, the functional prep, and I'm going to turn that over to Clark when we get to those slides, because he can talk a little bit to what you should prepare your customer for when you're implementing web scheduling. And then just lastly, how do you get started? What's the steps to get started? Next slide, please. Okay, one more. Okay, so just to kind of give you an overview of web scheduling itself, I think most of everybody on this call probably realizes this is developed by a Sage certified partner, Sedapta, and they are a developer and expertise in optimization and supply chain software. So what they have done is then built that interface between Sage X3 V12 and Sedapta and their product, web scheduling. Currently, we have been assisting with the web scheduling implementation, our team, Expert Services. But with that said, we really want to get our partners engaged and educated on the implementation process, so then you can take that on. But in the meantime, we are here to help. So when you do get a request, please, come to Expert Services, and we can help you through the implementation with the customer obviously engaged throughout the process. Some of the steps that we go through, very typical kind of a regular implementation obviously, but just specific to web scheduling. We have our planning phase, we have installation, configuration and testing, acceptance testing, user training. We go through then a go live prep and then actual go live. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in the next slide. So if you can continue on there, Clark. Okay, so planning. You want to get your signed SOW, obvious, for your services for the time that you're commit for implementing web scheduling. I often like to have a kickoff with the team that just sets the stage. It sets expectations. It ensures that everybody's on the same page, and that would be you as the partner, your customer, and if we're involved, Sage. I also like to recommend a hardware review call. There are some specifics about installing web scheduling and the kind of server environment. It's not an extensive call, it's not a complicated call, but we like to have a technical consultant review the installation requirements just to be prepared that there's no surprises. Then we go through the actual installation. So once the server is all set up, we're starting to go through the installation. Now, one thing to point out, it is a two-step process. So Zapdata Suite web scheduling is installed on the server. And then what we do is we generate this .req. And then that is sent to Zapdata, they send back a license. So just to make sure everybody's clear about that, normally when you buy or you order X3, you get that license immediately. With web scheduling, it's a two-step process. So when you place that order, you don't necessarily get the license right back. We do a partial install, get the license, and then continue on. Configuration and testing, we do this once it's installed. It's done by a manufacturing functional consultant, and that's what Clark has been engaged in on our previous implementations. We use a scoping document, and actually that's one of our handouts. It's included in the session today. So we do have a scoping document that just really asks questions like, what's your scheduling timing, and how do you do your work centers, and your work orders, anything special with your work orders, and your resource management. So that really helps us do that configuration. And then after that's done and we've done our testing, we then schedule user training. And there are two parts. There's an administration part of web scheduling, and there's also a functional part. And we do that training on the customer system, obviously, since we've done the configuration there. Next slide. Then we have user acceptance testing, very typical of a standard best practice implementation process. Very critical, as we all know, always the challenge, right? But it is, it's a small scope in that it's just web scheduling that they're checking, but we do want them to, send work orders over to web scheduling, check, the movement of work orders, the changing of whatever they need to do the scheduling, and then bring that back into X3. We typically allocate 2 weeks. And that is just kind of a baseline. If you have a more complex situation, it may be 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but 2 weeks is kind of what we gauge in our typical implementation to start out with. We do have documents, procedure documents. So we have the business procedure documents for step-by-step how to use the web scheduling. So that's included. And then obviously we'll have an agenda to help with what they should be doing in testing with web scheduling. Then we have our go live prep. So we want to make sure work orders that are, so you have either an upgrade, you might be going from version 11 or to version 12, or you might be a new implementation. In both cases, the work orders that are in progress that cannot be closed must be handled manually. So you need to make sure you clean up any work orders, especially if you're coming from a migration, and only open work orders can go into the web scheduling. So that's just kind of a key point to mention. And that's why we have a call usually, prior to go live, just to make sure it's clear to everybody, with, especially the customer. And then for us to switch from a test to a production environment, it's very simple. You're not going through any major technical configuration. It's a very simple point from a test environment to a production environment. And then we have our go live. Typically, we have a 1 week support. And again, that can change based on the complexity of the customer. Next slide. One more. Okay, so prerequisites. I'm not going to go through all of the technical pieces here, but one thing to note, and I think we're going to be just pretty honest with you, we really want our customers to be at least patch 31 or our 2022 R3 release. And that is, we've learned a lot in these implementations. We want to make it as pain-free as possible. There have been issues, to be honest, and we're getting, those issues resolved. So being current is going to make the whole implementation process easier. So keep that in mind, that patch 31 is really our minimum. And we're also implementing it with GraphQL, and the recommended level for that is P33, just because of the X3 side as well.
Right, and so Lisa, if I can just add that it's the integration between
Yes.
X3 and web scheduling that there's been extensive development in the later releases of X3. So that's why you want your customer to be on the latest version as possible.
Right. Good point. And this also allows you to get the most current version of web scheduling. So there's some nice features that, as Clark mentioned, with the integration, also with web scheduling, the actual product. So, that's another reason why we want you to be as current as possible. And then the rest of this, server requirements, SQL Server, I kind of outlined them in the document here, but there is an installation document that I think we did include as a handout that you can take a look at on page 18, 19. That's specific of what is required for the server environment for web scheduling. Okay, next slide, Clark. Okay, a little bit about the timeline and estimate. And I always preface this, and I think everybody knows this, depending on your customer, right? So we have our planning, 1 to 2 weeks, but we kind of allocate about a week to get things sorted out. Your installation, then configuration and testing. So configuration testing, we're allocating 2 weeks because we really want to make sure that we have that scoping document. We've gone through the setup, we understand the work centers, and we're going back and forth probably with the customer if there's any additional questions. But this is really on the consultant, the manufacturing consultant side. It's not get turned over to the customer at this point. But once that is done, then we're scheduling our user training. We break that up typically into 2 sessions because it's through Teams or it's remote. So we'll break that up into 2 sessions. And we have had requests to do on-site, and that's fine. If that's required, we can do that. It's not typical because it isn't a long training session, so it's usually done remote. Acceptance user testing, as I mentioned, we allow approximately 2 weeks for that. Go live prep, a couple of weeks, and then your go live. And so overall, what this comes out to be about a 2 to 3 month project. And I know some people may think that seems long because it's just one ISV, one product. But you do want to make sure, this is the manufacturing environment. They need to have scheduling accurate, correct. We just really want to make sure that the customer is very comfortable, because if they're coming from version 11, they're using production scheduler, and web scheduling is different. So we just want to make sure that comfort level is there. But what can affect it? Complex scheduling needs. If they have a lot of, they have a larger group of, a volume of work orders, there's more than several schedulers. You could have a complex situation like that. You may need your additional time for testing, scenarios that are a little bit more complicated, and if there's schedule conflicts. So you deal with vacations or holidays and that sort of thing can also expand the timeline.
So Lisa, if I can add here too, if you think about the training, the amount of time needed for our customers to learn MRP, it's the same thing in that there's thought process required on the customer side. It's not simply follow step 1, 2, 3. It's what do I do in this scenario? What do I do in that scenario? So therefore, there's more hands-on requirement for a customer to learn this than there is, for example, to enter a sales order.
Right. Yeah, good point. And then on the bottom right here, we just talk about, where our estimate came in. So you can see, it usually takes the 8 hours for the install, config, and testing. We allow 2 days to span over 2 weeks, training, testing, go live, and PM. So, and the project management side is, very minimal. So we don't, that's not a high number of hours. So in essence, that 48 hours is really not an expensive endeavor for the customer. We think that's, and again, it goes up and goes down depending, and if the partner takes on some of it, obviously that can go down if we're assisting. So there's a lot of factors that can play into that estimate. Okay, next slide, Clark. Okay, a few of the documents that we use, I mentioned already the installation manual. It's a large document, but there is a specific area in that document that's just for what we're typically recommending for our customers. Oftentimes it's a single server environment, unless it's more of a complex situation. But we do want to always make sure we're pointing to a test environment first before we go to production. I think I mentioned that earlier, but that is something critical. We don't want to do this right on production ever. A scoping questionnaire, we're going to be including that as our handout. The training, PowerPoint, and our business procedure, as we noted. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn this next few slides over to Clark. And Clark, I think there's a couple of slides that you can speak to.
Perfect, great, thank you, Lisa. So one of the reasons for putting in some of this functional prep for web scheduling implementation is that what we found is best is that putting web scheduling within the overall project plan is most effective at a time when the customer has a good understanding of the manufacturing flow, because basically those steps are critical in understanding before we get to the scheduling step. So with web scheduling being later in the flow, there's some initial setup that you're going to be reviewing with your customer, and we wanted to provide a brief overview of those steps, of those things to take into consideration. So we've got initially you want to, within your scoping, is document the scheduling scenarios to be used for testing. From a setup within X3, we want to talk about unavailable periods, work centers, routings, product attributes, and the matrix optimization, and we'll just jump into those. So we're all familiar with our default work days and unavailable periods within our site setup, but these are critical pieces now for web scheduling. So of course, we're going to schedule based on our default work days, and where we always talk about unavailable period, at least I always spoke about unavailable period during the initial phases of the project, they rarely got updated and the values didn't get, the matrix didn't get populated with those fields. Well, for the purposes of web scheduling, this is how web scheduling will know that the facility's closed for things like Labor Day, Thanksgiving, etc. So it becomes that much more important that we include those values. Work centers are key. So first and foremost, we want to identify whether the work center is a constraint or not. And this is basically defining finite capacity or infinite capacity. If we do not check constraint, that means we've got infinite capacity and all of our operations will begin at the same time. This may be applicable for something like a drying stage, where it doesn't matter, there isn't capacity, therefore we would leave that checked, but typically we want a constraint. The key here within web scheduling is sorry about that. The key there within web scheduling is the structure, and most importantly, within the weekly structure, the timetable schema needs to be defined. And for reference, the timetable schema is where we define our start and end time, so our work time for the day. It doesn't matter if they vary, but these values need to be here, or web scheduling will not be able to perform the automatic scheduling algorithms. So this is really critical. And then there's a local parameter defined here on the manufacturing area of our general parameters, that you can also set a default parameter or default timetable schema. So at least there is something that would allow the scheduling to occur. However, that may be wrong if you have variation between your work centers within the timetable schema for each. A couple other key areas on the work center is first the variation, and this is where we would define our downtime. So this is how web scheduling would know that we have, for example, planned maintenance. It would be scheduled within that variation. The next is the replacement. So we're familiar with the replacement grid on the work center function. This is critical for web scheduling. With this, it gives us the ability to move an operation in web scheduling from one work center to another. If these work centers are defined as replacements, so we're looking at work center MAC 031, and we've defined MAC 032, the blender number 2, as a replacement. So what that means is that since these are here, I have the ability to manually move an operation between these two work centers, or the automatic scheduling algorithm can move an operation between these two work centers based on capacity. If I didn't have a replacement, I would not be able to make that change, so this becomes critical. And of course, we know that within our replacements, we can define priorities, and the automatic scheduling algorithm will take those priorities into account. Next is the routings. So some key points of the routings is web scheduling is only going to look at what I deem the primary work center, the initial work center listed on our operations. It ignores the labor work center. So we're basically just scheduling that one area. So in this case where we've got a machine and a labor combination, it's only going to schedule the machine. If it were a scenario where our operation was just a labor, then it would schedule the labor, of course. It's just the fact that anything listed under the labor gets ignored. Key elements that come from the routing is our setup time, our runtime or rates as they're defined. Another key area is our production step. In this case, our first operation is defined as not being a production step. Therefore, web scheduling will not see that operation. It is not included. It does not get imported or loaded into web scheduling. You're not defining that as a, since it's not a production step, it doesn't need to be scheduled. So next is the scheduling. And so scheduling is key, and just as a reminder, in that when we see our scheduling option, it's referring to when the next operation is defined here, operation 10 is going to run. So these values from scheduling also move into web scheduling in terms of in your sequence of when your operations will run. So of course, we know that we've got a whole list of different options for scheduling, and the detail provided in help explains the way in which it'll work in web scheduling. So the X3 functionality applies directly to web scheduling. The optimization matrix. This is more recent functionality. And basically what this does is it's used within web scheduling to reduce setup times and maximize scheduling efficiencies. So rather than use the setup time that we just saw in the routing, the setup time here, we're relying on the information put in the setup time matrix. So basically what we have is an attribute. An attribute is basically a grouping. So in our example here, we're talking about color. So we're talking about, we would define the color on each of our products. So red, black, blue, yellow, white, whatever that may be. Other examples of attributes might be packaging size, it might be packaging type, it might be tooling requirements. So maybe everything using a similar tool might have an attribute defined. So however your customer groups their production, that grouping is an attribute. And how it works is that within our setup matrix, as part of the optimization matrix, we would define first what our setup time is when we change from one attribute to another. Then we define what that setup time is when we have a production run from the same attribute. So we're running black and we're going to run black. Our setup time is 1 hour. So what it'll do is when the web scheduling, automatic scheduling algorithms run, it factors that in and will group your attributes based on, try to keep same attributes together, and then keep your different attributes in similar groups as well. And then because everything isn't that easy, we have exceptions, and color is a great example of exceptions where in this case we've got, if we're going to go from black to white, our setup time is going to be 5 hours versus other different attributes of 3 hours. Or if we're going from black to yellow, it's 4 hours. So you have that capability of listing out all of those exceptions within that grouping. So our attributes themselves are defined at the product or product site level. This setup time matrix that you see is defined for this one attribute, and then the optimization matrix, which I didn't show you, can list the different matrix in order in which they're going to run. So for example, we could do an optimization matrix that first looks at color and second looks at packaging size. And we would define that on the work center. So the optimization matrix covering this off, this isn't something that needs to be done in advance, but it's something to be aware of. Another key point with the optimization matrix is this only applies for scheduling. These setup values are not factored in for standard cost calculations. So even though your customer would use the optimization matrix, you would still need your setup times in your routings for the purpose of calculating your standard costs. And perfect, Lisa, back to you.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Clark. Good information. Okay, so how to get started. So we wanted to kind of outline, what's your steps when you get a request from a customer? What is the process that you should go through? So next slide, Clark. Okay, obviously as a customer, they're going to contact you. They're going to contact their Sage certified partner. You can request a demo. They can request a demo. We can help with that demo. And that's often needed, before signing, for a web scheduling implementation and signing on for the product. And as a partner, you're contacting us if you want to request a demo or place the order. So, we're happy to do that because whatever is going to make the customer feel comfortable, and that's typical process, of the pre-sales is we're doing demos or engaging the customer or understanding a little bit about what their scheduling needs are. And to make them, feel comfortable moving forward, placing an order. Then once that order is in motion, the partner then obviously you guys will contact Sage to receive an estimate and the statement of work. And then you initiate the SOW with the customer, and then we can get started. So again, as our partners and all of you become more familiar with web scheduling and the implementation or parts of it, that SOW can reflect that. But if expert services is engaged, you're looking at that 48 hours typically in those SOWs. And I mentioned earlier, we have an initial call with the customer. That would be the next step. all of us on a call to answer questions, discuss project timelines. Is there any drop dead dates? Anything that we have to work toward? Answer any questions, from now we've got a little bit closer. They've seen web scheduling. Now we may have some questions on the plan, and then we prepare for a kickoff call with the remaining people on the scheduling team from the customer side. And then in our kickoff call, very typical introductions. We do go through, what is the customer's current web scheduling process, just to give us as much information as possible. Any gaps, concerns with what they're doing now. Some are, like I said, are using the V11. They may be on spreadsheets. We just kind of want to know that, get a good feel of what, to prepare for giving them information on web scheduling. And then we'll go through that implementation process and then discuss project schedules. So, one thing I do want to just to mention also is we are encouraging, we want to encourage you to, if you have customers that are interested in web scheduling, we want to get as many references as possible. We are in the middle of doing several implementations and preparing them for go live in the next few months. So that's exciting, because the more references we have, obviously, the more comfort level that all of our customers have. So if we can help, I think everybody does have the North American COE email. Clark, I think you've mentioned that in prior calls.
We have, yeah.
Okay, and we can even put it in the chat. Or you can contact myself directly, or Clark, or to our general email box if you do need assistance, or if you need help with demos or anything like that. We can also engage pre-sales. We don't particularly do the demos, but we would engage pre-sales to do that. Okay, that's kind of my spiel on web scheduling and the implementation process. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat, or if you can unmute.
There aren't as of yet, so just throw questions into the questions section on your GoToMeeting grid, and I'll just add as well, if you're on a project that has web scheduling part of it and you have questions in terms of the setup, please feel free just to contact me. I'll be glad to answer your questions to streamline the process as we go forward. So I'm available to assist as needed.
Wonderful.
Great. So there's no questions at the moment. If any come up, we'll address them, and we'll just continue on. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
Good information.
Clark, are you speaking?
Thank you, Lisa. I did something to unmute myself, or to mute myself, which people, that was part of the stick, I guess. Listening skills. You can't hear me. Thank you. So I'm sorry. So this month, we're talking about listening skills, and part one is why we want to develop effective listening skills. We hear constantly about the importance. If you're on LinkedIn, you'll see articles on listening skills. You'll see LinkedIn learning courses on listening skills. Other resources have topics on listening skills, and really, why do we need to learn listening skills? Why do we need to develop our listening skills more? So first of all, develop listening skills helps with effective communication. It's essential for effective communication to be to truly understand what the person you're communicating with is saying, and that comes through listening skills. Secondly, building rapport, and we all see that ourselves when we're talking to somebody and that we're in communication with somebody, whether it be a customer, colleague, friend, whomever, and that when we see a person is listening, we develop a greater connection. Leadership abilities. Effective leaders are skilled listeners. They understand our needs, concerns, and by active listening, you can get more informed. You can make more informed decisions, provide better guidance, and foster a better, positive work environment. Conflict resolution is another reason. Improved listening skills enable you to navigate conflicts more effectively. By understanding all sides of an issue, you can mediate disagreements and find solutions that satisfy everyone. Enhanced problem solving, same thing. Listening attentively helps you fully grasp the nuances of a complex problems. The understanding allows you to come up with creative, well-informed solutions. Networking. Again, similar to building rapport, listening is key in effective networking. Client satisfaction. So a little repetitive again in terms of building rapport, but in client-facing roles, attentive listening is crucial. By understanding clients' needs and concerns, you can tailor your products or services to better meet their expectations, resulting in higher satisfaction and loyalty. And in our role, we often see that where we hear a client has a specific issue, concern, or need, but we actually uncover something different when we ask them questions and listen to their response. So it's very critical in our roles. Adaptability, so the ability to adapt to those changing environments and circumstances are crucial in today's environment. And by effective listening, we're able to keep pace with those things that are constantly changing. Presentation skills, typically more in person than via remote like today, but improving your listening skills can enhance your presentation abilities by actively gauging your audience reactions and adjusting your content based on their feedback. Negotiating success. In negotiations, attentive listening helps you understand the other party's position, needs, and priorities. This insight allows you to negotiate more effectively and reach mutually beneficial agreements. And then lastly, we have innovation and creativity. Active listening encourages you to consider diverse perspectives and ideas. The openness to different viewpoints can lead to more innovative and creative thinking within your team or organization. The other aspect of listening is too often very common in the consulting role is we're waiting to speak as opposed to listening to what's being said, and what's being said is actually more important than what we want to share at the moment. It's kind of an A and B, the one comes first. So in next month's Consulting Toolbox, we'll get into some tips in terms of effective listening. To build that, we've got a survey coming. I've got it listed as a poll, but it's a survey that's going to come up either after the meeting or you'll receive it in an email. But what is your best tip for effective listening? And we'll share some of those in the next Consulting Toolbox. Okay, so we talked about this Sage Partner Hub, Sage University for You. Partner learning program we've talked about in the previous sessions. Expert workshops and knowledge bites, we talked about how you can access that information. Now, starting this month, you're going to receive an expert workshop handout. So rather than us reviewing the list of expert workshops that are available, there's a handout in the handout section that will list all of the courses that are available. We will take the opportunity to highlight some of the special ones that we think will be of more value or specific interest, but we were going to remove this portion from the slides going forward and replace it with some other content. So here's some of the knowledge bite sessions we've got coming up in September, October, and into November. Just give you a chance to see some of those. Then we get into expert workshops, so project management implementation best practices in September, which is a really good course that I've done. On the financial side, there's several courses coming up in September listed here. As well, we have the distribution and manufacturing workshops listed. Again, another project management implementation, or that's the same one actually. We've got tips and trips for importing data and AV stock valuation, recommendation, and troubleshooting. That's a really good course that Simon leads, and really good information for troubleshooting those issues. Under the development session, we've highlighted using Sage X3 SQL views to create requesters and queries, the level 1 course scheduled for later this month, as well as expert workflows in 4GL, and then add-on development and licensing best practices coming up in September. And then we've ISV training, as we've mentioned. Procession is the first ISV to do training through SageU. They've got 2 sessions coming up. Procession quality control is in October, and procession formulation is in August. I've taken both of these courses. Roosevelt from Procession does a really good job on these. They're well worth the time, provide great value. They really added to my knowledge. I've been on several projects with Procession, and these courses actually expanded on that experience and knowledge, so I highly recommend these as well. Okay, so upcoming, as always, the Consultant Roundtable is the 3rd Friday of each month. The next Consultant Roundtable is on Friday, September 15th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Topic on that is one of the new developments coming out of our team, the Center of Excellence, on Lisa, what's the proper terminology for the workflow?
You're talking about the next session?
Yeah. So development. I just blanked. The development.
You mean your preventive maintenance?
No, the one that's just ready for release. The
the XA 108.
That's the one. Yes, thank you.
Batch printing. Oh yeah. So batch printing is going to be submitted. Yeah, it's going to be actually on Sage City when we release it. And just a quick point: if you have not contacted me we're asking for a ULA for any of our free customizations. So if anybody on this part, I've gotten most, I think, requests. We do need that signed prior to getting access to Sage City for downloading those customizations coming, which is accurate. The batch printing is our next customization coming out probably in early September.
And the batch printing is via email, correct?
Via email, yeah. Batch printing with yes, batch emailing. You'd have a group of invoices that you need to mass email to your customers. That's the purpose, and there's 5 documents: purchase order, sales invoice, AR invoice, customer statement, and purchase order. Did I already say that? I think there's 5.
Yes.
Missing one probably. Order acknowledgement. Order acknowledgement is the other one. So yeah, so it's a great mod. I think it's something that's been requested many times. So we've actually formalized it and made it a customization.
And in that session, we'll cover the technical aspects of it as well as the functional aspects. So we'll provide you with information so that you have the tools when it's time to implement on your customer side. Thank you, Lisa, for bailing me out there.
Sure. Oh, no, sure. I'm sorry, I just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see any questions in the any questions listed at this time. So we'll give you a little bit of extra time back on this Friday in the summer to take advantage of however you choose to. Please provide any feedback, questions to the team. And again, once the session's over, a survey will appear as well. You'll get that same survey in an email that follows up the session. So again, Lisa, thank you very much. And everyone, thanks for your attendance today. Please feel free to share your invites with any of your colleagues on your team. And again, thank you very much for the great support of the X3 Consultant Roundtable. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.